right?
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another installment of Familiar with the Matter, where I talk to people who know things about stuff. And today my guest is the Script Doctor. Good afternoon, Script Doctor.
Good afternoon. I know some stuff about things.
I figured you did, and that's why I thought I'd have you on, because I was doing a stream the other day that was on a completely different subject, and as I closed up the show, suddenly the subject of the Hollywood strikes came up, and everybody ignored the stuff I was talking about for the hour previous and just wanted to know, what do you know about the strikes? What's going on with the strikes? And I was like, not as much as I probably should, but I know someone who might. So here we are. But before we get into it, real quick, thank you, Derek LaRue, so much, again, as always, for your continued support and generosity. I really do appreciate it. And good afternoon, everyone. I hope you'll forgive me if I don't go through the litany of hellos today, just for the sake of time, but I really appreciate you guys turning out. And if you can, share the stream and or like, if you have the opportunity, I'd appreciate it. Hope you're all doing well today. So for those of you that do not know, back on May 2nd, the Writers Guild of America went on strike, and just about 6 days ago, on July 13th, the Screen Actors Guild and or hyphen American Federation of Television and Radio Artists also went on strike. And to better understand what's going on and why it's going on, Script Doctor, what professional experience makes you familiar with the matter of the current strikes?
Well, I've been a professional screenwriter for a little over 17 years now. I've been basically, I'm not an expatriate because I am from Canada, but I've been basically traveling between Canada and the United States for a majority of that time, excluding the 3 years that we've lost due to the pandemic. And I've been working in Hollywood in a lot of various capacities, not just in writing, but in other stuff. I've worked in set design, props. I've helped out with casting. I've been assistants and so forth. But mostly I write screenplays, and as I also am a script doctor. So people come to me with screenplays that they need to be workshopped a little bit. Sometimes I get emergency calls where during a production something has happened. Either they lost an actor for a location or something of that variance. And if the writer or the showrunner is having a difficult time getting that reconciled, sometimes someone else from that production will contact me to lend a hand. Very rarely, excuse me, very rarely do I ever get to meet the showrunners in that regard, because it's kind of a little uncouth that you come in to rewrite or solve a problem for a showrunner show. But a couple of times I have been called in by a showrunner to do a little touch up, because it usually fits into the forte that I have, or they have a huge, bigger problem to deal with and they need a quick fix. And I am usually readily available, just because where I usually happen to live in Canada, a lot of stuff is filmed up here for film and television. So that kind of makes it made it convenient for me. And I actually up until 2019, I was an associate member of the WGA. So I was paying my $100 a year union dues up until that point. In which case, when the pandemic hit, I didn't make my units, and therefore I was no longer considered a member at that point. You have to sort of surpass 24 units, or they used to call them points, now they call them units. 24 units within 3 years, and you get full membership. It makes it a lot easier if you're also a U.S. citizen or a full U.S. resident. I was not, because I only was able to be out there for about 5 months a year due to like projects and scheduling and back and forth. But yeah, so I was a part of that for a while. In fact, I literally joined the union as an associate after the previous strike, which was between 07 and 08. I joined in the summer of 09 officially. And now we're in another strike for very similar reasons, actually.
Yeah, and we'll get into that in a second. First off, guys, be sure to take a look at the description below for all the links to Script Doctor's YouTube channel and Twitter, Patreon, all that good stuff. So if you haven't already checked out his YouTube channel, he does videos on, well, Hollywood stuff as well, but also occasionally he's Conan.
Yeah.
Runs around and such.
Need a good respite to slaughter enemies from Hollywood.
Yeah. Whether he's slaying demons in Diablo or running around slaying monsters in Conan Exiles, but also you'll often find him popping up on places like Midnight's Edge, And I think I see you at least one time, probably more than that, on Friday Night Tights or something like that.
I've been invited once to Friday Night Tights, but
Oh,
I've not been able to go on. And I was invited like 2 years ago, right when I was kind of just
oh.
getting started in YouTube.
Why
Um,
do I have a mental image of you on a stream with like heel versus babyface or Gary or something? I don't know. Maybe it's just maybe I
I
thought I
have
saw you there.
I have been on streams with them over at Midnight's Edge a few
Maybe
times.
that's it. Maybe that's
Probably
it.
that's
Okay.
it. Yeah, but no, I have not been on Friday Night Tights. Love to hang out with those guys, but again, it has to work with my schedule. Fridays are kind of
Sure.
tight with me. And I really liked Gary's content as well. He was a great audience members. He had a great audience member perspective on what was going on in the industry, and I think it's pretty
Yeah.
valuable to listen to guys like him because he can kind of keep you a little humble and pop that bubble that a lot of
Yeah.
us who work in the industry kind of get lost in.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's begin with the writer's strike since it started first, and that might be one you have a bit more particular insight to. So, I'm going to play the complete dummy here because technically speaking, I really am. What are the conditions under which, in summary, the writers decided to strike now, and what is it that they are seeking in general? I know they have a long list of demands, but
Mhm.
if there's a capsule version of what their general concerns are.
Well, every 3 years, the WGA negotiates a new contract, which lasts for approximately 3 years. So this negotiation was inevitable, whether there was a pandemic or not. 2023 would have been a negotiating year for them to renegotiate contracts with the AMPTP, which is basically just establishing a baseline of value for people in writing. And that just means like if someone brand new comes in and they want to work on a television show and maybe they don't have a full agent yet or anything of that nature, you can go to the WGA website or find a WGA booklet and know exactly what the standard rates of pay are in the industry so that when you do meet someone that is legit, they're not exploiting you. And one of the things that not a lot of people realize is that there's a lot of independent studios and there's a lot of ancillary studios within the Hollywood area of California that do take advantage of and exploit people who are coming in there to work in this industry. And so the WGA has certain is basically your barometer. It tells you who to be essentially look out for being exploited. So if you get a deal where someone says buys your screenplay and they give you an option, it's like say $1,000 for a 6-month option, you'd find a reference to that point on the WGA website. But if they came in and they said, oh, it's standard operating procedure that I give you this money to option, but you have to put in money in order for it to get produced, you'd then be able to pick out that person's not legit. They're just trying to exploit you, take your money, that type of thing. That's one of the basic aspects of what the WGA and SAG-AFTRA does. Because again, not a lot of what goes on in the industry is public knowledge.
Right. Yeah.
It's like with anyone else. If you're just, back in the day before the internet, if you went looking for a job, you'd print off a bunch of resumes and you'd go to various businesses that you saw. You may not know exactly what they do or how they work, but you're just pitching yourself to try and get a job. And each one has their own rate of pay for the type of work that they offer. Studios have something similar to that, but over the years, the decades, they decided to create a baseline of starting point so that, kind of like a minimum wage, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, as you get better in skill or become more valuable, you can negotiate above that. But basically, it's just saying that when you're getting into this industry, the industry itself is agreeing that we will not be paying you less than what this baseline is because we know
Right.
that is your basic standard for the work that you're putting forth. And
Okay.
that's essentially what the union originally started out to be. And as the industry kind of grew and became more of a career, um, the union wanted to make it reflect a bit more of a regular day job and regular career, and that involved getting getting a pension plan operated on or brought forth.
Right.
Because
Can you
yeah.
actually, sorry, real quick, can you actually, and I don't know if this, you tell me, is it reasonable for someone to believe that they could make a full-time career out of being a writer in Hollywood? I mean, like ballpark figures, X percentage, X number of people go into trying to become a professional writer in Hollywood.
Mhm.
What percentage actually turn it into a full-time career, do you think?
It's probably a little higher than 25%.
Okay.
The thing is that like the one rule is you only fail when you give up is essentially
Sure.
what they say in the industry. So you can keep at it for decades and never make a modest living or at least some stuff, but you may
Hmm.
not hit it big until you do. You just happen to write that one script that just hits the time and place. Uh, it hits the taste of everybody in the industry. They want to make it. They want to put it out there, and it hits with the audience, and they love it.
Hmm.
You never know. It's like with any type, because this is a creative art profession, and it's not to try to diminish the blue collar jobs, which are very valuable, but it requires a different skill set, and it also requires the fact that you are appealing to a subjective form of taste as opposed to an actual necessity. Like
Right.
we need water, we need food, we
Hmm.
need repairs, we need shelter, we need clothing.
Yeah. Dishwashers and grave diggers will never go out of work. Yeah.
Yeah. Like entertainment we need, but again, it's a very broad spectrum of taste. So that makes it
Hmm.
a far more difficult and higher risk industry. And
Hmm.
there's a reason why actors, before they were given the better term of actor, they were considered vagabonds. They'd just be traveling from place to place, town to town, putting on shows, taking
Right.
whatever they can from the audience that was donating whatever they could. And it wasn't very, I mean, they did it because they loved it, but it was also, a very hard life. And that essentially will most likely never go away with this
Yeah.
industry. But this is the first time since performing way even back, to the ages of Aristotle and Socrates and all that type of stuff, where it's actually an industry that ends up making a lot of money,
Hmm.
and you can actually turn it into a career that puts you shoulder to shoulder with blue collar people. And that's one of the things a lot of people as audience members don't quite realize is that yes, there's a lot of money being thrown around with productions and shows and distribution and whatnot, but the vast majority of people working uh, don't often make minimum wage essentially at the
Sure.
end of the day for the year, because number one, there's a whole lot of people in the industry, and number two, every single project is kind of has a potential risk, so it doesn't always end up yielding success. So that
Yeah.
requires a lot of turnover, a lot of changing of staff, if you will, and a
Hmm.
lot of people that just decide, you know what, as much as I love this job, I'd rather have something safer, more steady and reliable. And
Right.
people leave for that. I have some great friends who um, were editors and directors, and they just couldn't take the rejection, and which is basically 99% of this industry is rejection, and they ended up becoming uh, you know, teachers of English for a second language. So they'd go to other countries
Yeah.
because it was the only thing their skill set could
Sure.
do because they dedicated so much of it to that. I
Right.
myself, I've always been kind of a sponge for knowledge. I know a lot of basic electronics, carpentry, plumbing, things of that nature. Where if I really, really
Mhm.
had to, I could probably get an apprenticeship, and I'd granted be a little bit late in life for me because I'm in my late 30s, but I could do that and do it competently and probably make a living that way if I so chose. But I just love writing so much, and I love telling stories, and I love also encouraging other writers and getting them to tell
Mhm.
stories as well. It's just there's a lot of value. It gives that flourish to life.
Sure.
Uh,
So with this this round of now renegotiation for contracts and everything, what is?
mhm.
I'm assuming that pay, as I've heard elsewhere, is the major sticking point. But what specifically are the writers wanting from the studios that they're not currently getting or weren't getting in their previous negotiation?
So basically, it's the same issue that has occurred with every new technology that has come in. So, with the invention of television and the rebroadcasting of films, to the invention of television shows and then syndication, and now what they keep on calling new media, which
Hmm.
is just the involvement of internet as a distribution port or portal, and they want transparency on that. Uh, right now, as you're well aware, with all the streaming services that have popped up over the last decade, there's no definitive rating system comparable to like the Nielsen ratings of what is popular, what is successful, what people are really watching. It's
Right.
usually done through third parties. It's unverifiable, and as a result, they're using that hidden data to prevent them from having to negotiate what would be considered an already pre-established deal of compensation when it comes to redistributing scalable work. And for those that are unaware, scalable work is basically you make one thing that can be copied multiple times and then sold to multiple people. So books are your principal form of scalable work. The printing press made it very easy for an author to print multiple copies of their novel and sell it to everybody for them to read. And the way that we did it on film and television side with syndication is that we were like, okay, well, if this is being distributed again, we think we should get a piece of that, because obviously the people that are distributing are making a lot of money, and it'd be akin to, say, a theatrical show. So when you're acting on the stage, in many contracts, I'm not 100% if this still stands, but I think there's something similar to it, because again, I don't work in theater. I work mostly in recorded media. But that is actors and people who work on that production in a theater, they get a percentage of the ticket sales for every show that they work on, because they are repeating the performance. They're doing it over and over and over again. They're there physically. There's an interaction and energy between the audience. The audience are coming back every day. They're paying. That's how they get, make their money. And sometimes it's a portion of the tickets, or sometimes it's a contract for X amount of dollars that they assumed will be recouped based on the length of the show and how often it's run day by day and so forth. And so the talent, the writers and actors, thought that type of model being worked on should apply in some regards similar to the way we transmit recorded entertainment. And essentially the WGA and SAG-AFTRA are saying, well, we know once we came to the agreement of the syndication model, which happened in the 60s, if I'm not mistaken, but could have been later, they figured, well, wouldn't it make sense to have that same type of model applied to streaming? Because again, you have a customer that is paying for the streaming service on a monthly basis. And some of those dollars, all those dollars essentially going to the studios that host the streaming. And some of that is going to pay for infrastructure and maintenance. And a little bit of that is going into investing into newer episodes or films that will be broadcast on that streaming service. And then the rest goes to the company. And I might be in the minority of this. I'm perfectly fine with, a smart, savvy businessman that runs a studio taking whatever the board of directors feels they deserve with regards to pay. The only question that I have is that if they're taking a massive amount of money, but then they're crying poverty to the workers, that needs to be scrutinized. Because how can one party say, yes, this guy's doing great, doing well, we're making tons of money, let's give them a bonus, and then go to the people that make the content that this person approves of and puts into distribution and says, yeah, sorry, we can't pay you.
See, this is the thing I keep coming, and I've seen on Twitter over the last several days. I guess we're crossing over into sort of the actor stuff, but I've seen these blurbs about, an actor saying, here's the $27 check I got in residuals from this show I did 10 years ago, and this is a crime against humanity or something. And I keep trying. Now, I'm an English major, for those of you that don't know, so I'm not an economics major, but I'm trying to conceptualize in my head, even if the numbers for the streaming services were transparent, let's say you knew how many times the show's been clicked on, how, and if you don't know the answer to this, it's perfectly fine. I'm kind of musing to myself, but when a show's being, like when a network's being paid money to put advertisements up on a show, you can sort of say this show, made this much money for the company because this is how many impressions we got, this is how much the ads were paid for, and so on. When it comes to streaming stuff, just as a hypothetical, regardless of what streaming service you're talking about, if I put up a new show on my streaming service and it costs X number of dollars and people are supposed to get so much money for it, but the subscription numbers either stay stagnant or go down, if the streaming service as a whole is not making any more money because of this new show, exactly how, and again, maybe this is just some kind of like esoteric question, how do you measure the value of a show just based on how many views it got as compared to the money coming in, if it's all on a flat subscription basis and not support? And I understand some streaming services are starting to do ad support and stuff now, so we're just going back in time as far as the model goes. But when it comes to straight streaming, how do you figure out how much a show is worth to the people that made it in that situation?
And that's the biggest problem. That's the problem that I brought up when Netflix started doing original content. The model for streaming of basically saying, oh, I liken it to video games in regards to you're paying like a monthly fee for an MMO, but how much new content are you really getting in that? You get a big world to explore, sure, and then maybe once a year you'll get an expansion that's free as part of the subscription, but you're not really getting anything else. So
Hmm.
that's why MMOs, in some cases they can last for years, like say a World of Warcraft, but others can collapse on themselves because there's just not enough people to subscribe and do it because they've gone through all the content so quickly. So you have to constantly keep adding, but that takes more money, which means it takes it out of your bottom line of the subscriber fee. And yeah, it can't be sustainable. And so that was one of the things I brought up to, at least when I was part of the union as associate member, to a union captain. It's like, listen, streaming may be good with regards to on-demand content for customers,
Hmm.
but there's no model there that can make it sustainable, because just like with video games, you get a limit of people that's going to be your sort of lifers with regards to paying X amount of dollars a month to keep playing this game because of whatever. And it's the same thing's going to happen with the streaming services, and that ends up being the case now. Even if you're in the best case scenario where, say, every single person on this planet has a television and a bank account, at the current population, that's 8 billion subscribers that you can have on your streaming service. But the studios keep on working under a model of constant growth as opposed to a form of balance and sustainability. And so what happens when you hit every single person that has that subscription service, but you're still trying to grow? Excuse me. You're still trying to grow, and you're spending money in a way that you're trying to grow. And that's the big problem here. Like they did not really realize um, what the impact of this was. And what the WGA and SAG are asking for is basically just transparency first to try and get to the root of the problem. And a funny thing happened as a result of this strike. So I'd always been hearing rumors with regard to residuals and how it works into the functions for actors and whatnot. And it's very, very similar to how it works for writers as well. But
Hmm.
it's the relationship with when it came to the fact that studios were starting their own streaming services. And I think one of the reasons why they started their own streaming services is because they kind of realized, with the way the model was on Netflix and how they were licensing to Netflix, that they were actually losing money. So essentially,
Yes.
Netflix was kind of ripping them off. Sure, they were able to sell licensed friends out to Netflix for, say, $5 million a year for 5 years. That looks great. Or it was definitely, throwing a ballpark number, but it was a lot more than that. And that
Hmm.
looks great for Warner Brothers. But when they finished crunching the numbers on the math, and they finished realizing, oh wow, the payments that we're getting for ourselves and the payments that we're giving out to our talent that worked on this are so much smaller than what we get on syndication and network, that yeah, this is not sustainable for us. And instead of renegotiating a term with Netflix to actually get their value, the studios decided, hey, let's just make our own streaming service, keep those profits, and it's okay that we're giving the residuals will be the same with regards to our in-house staff on these shows or films, because that's Netflix is already establishing that as a rule already. And that's really like the bad case. The only studio that actually figured it out and did a proper model was Comcast Universal with Peacock. When they launched, they had a tier for minimal ads, and then it had a premium tier with 0 ads. And it's nobody's really signing up for it, and it has nothing to do with the fact that the model's bad. It has to do with the fact that NBC Universal and Comcast haven't been making good quality shows for a very long time.
Well, yeah, no, yeah.
So
Whenever I see something about Peacock, my first, especially after what I've the advertising, the marketing, everything, I just think of kind of like, I think part of the problem is that it's so closely associated with network television. It already feels like it's probably behind the times anyway because it's got the NBC logo attached to it.
to a
But
degree,
then
yeah.
maybe that's my own personal psychology or something. But yeah, now you have studios becoming channels. That's all it really is at the end of the day. Is studios becoming channels, and they've
Mhm.
got exclusive content, just like PS5's got an exclusive game that will never come to Xbox and things like that, and bringing people, and then they can control not only the content but the narrative. And the finances, and not have to deal with third parties sometimes to their own failings, as we've seen with Disney and so on. But yeah, go ahead.
I will just say that it's what it really is it's a level of arrogance in the studio side of things, and I don't know if it's coming directly from the heads or the board or the accounting departments, but anytime I was just looking at Netflix, it's like, okay, if they repeat this over and over again, you're essentially having customers have cable packages back in the day. You're just buying
Yeah.
a cable package.
Yeah.
So if that's going to be the case, the inevitability with the cable package is that at the start, there were no commercials, but they couldn't sustain it because the cost of producing the shows and broadcasting and the infrastructure was so much that they needed to get another source of revenue that's beyond the customer.
Yep.
And that is how advertising works. And the other part too is that advertising allows for the best work to succeed. I know a lot of people like to argue, especially in my industry, like to argue that the early 2000s up until 2014, 16 were like the golden age of television. And I say, no, the golden age of
No.
television was prior to that,
Yeah.
because number one, you had a lot more better written shows, but you also had a lot fiercer competition, and they were also making a lot more money. The AMC's and the prestige cable access shows, well produced, well written, but they didn't hit the broader audience that you'd expect, because internet was just starting to really pick up and become a default service in the home, much like
Yeah.
telephones were after a few years that they were invented, and then television later on. So the biggest problem is that, what can you do to reconcile this? And what we end up having is the studio saying, well, we just have to get the subscribers, and that will pay for itself, failing to realize that you make more money on selling commercial airtime to advertisers than you ever will off an individual customer, because it's all about the reach and the eyes on the product. And the way to get more eyes on the product is you have a successful show, so that you increase the value of the commercial ads that you would sell in between act 1, 2, and 3, and between the actual next broadcast that you have. But you also have this added bonus of, this is now has an on-demand aspect. It's network or cable television on demand, which means that you no longer, as a studio, ever have to compete for a time slot again.
Well, you don't have to compete for a time slot, and you also don't have, especially without releasing any numbers, you can't sell the ad time for a particular show at higher prices or anything to particular advertisers and say, well, look how many people watch this show. How many eyes do you want to see on your product? And that's one of the things that's one of the things I always thought, just watching, not watching Netflix, but just seeing, if you go on Netflix, there's always the joke of there's a zillion shows on there, nothing worth watching, because there were no roadblocks. There was nothing telling the people internally that this isn't worthwhile, because there was nothing to say what is or is not worthwhile. Everybody could have their pet project. Everybody could do whatever the heck they wanted, because there was no risk. It was just, we'll make this show, and we're not going to think about whether or not it's going to draw any eyes to any advertisers. We just need to keep putting in content. So having
content
that
to retain subscribers, that's basically it. Yeah.
That's it. A real quick, previously, thank you, John Miller. Don't worry, Scribe, actors can't math either. It all depends on the actor. Dolph Lundgren was like a biochemist or something.
Biochemist, he's very good with math. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So what are you talking about, John Miller? Jeez. Okay, so we're kind of drifting, but it's perfectly fine drifting. So with the Writers Guild right now, let's stick with the Writers Guild, since this is kind of your ballywick.
Sure.
Of their current list of complaints, what would you say is their weakest argument?
Their weakest argument that I found was a minimum and maximum mandatory staffing on a television show.
Yes, I heard about this. Explain that to people exactly how the writers' rooms works and things like that, as far as this is concerned.
So one of the brilliant things about television is that the writer and the showrunner essentially have the most power over the television show than the directors, actors, and even in some cases the producers. And they get to control the type of room that they want to have when it comes to writing their show. And this is always this is where showrunners hire like an assistant and maybe a handful of writers that they want to work with, because they know they're going to deliver on the quality that is needed for this show to be a success. Some writers need a larger room, and some writers need a small room, and some writers, like say for instance J.M. Krasinski, who did Babylon 5, didn't need much of anybody. I think the only person he actually talked to was Harlan Ellison when he was making Babylon 5.
Yeah.
So, that's just the nature of the game, and whatever works for the show that is successful, the showrunner is responsible for that. And what we've had here is, because because of whatever's been going on with people investing into the studios and what their mandates are, and people coming straight out of university with a very skewed idea of how the world should work, we have ended up getting an infiltration of people that are not really suited for this industry. And as a result of that, they are demanding compelled hiring just for the numbers as opposed to based on merit.
Right. So
And
hiring people even if you don't need them in order to maintain a quota, basically.
yeah, like, so for instance, there's a story about Mark Zicree, who he has a YouTube channel called like the Mr. Sci-Fi Guy, I think it is. But he was brought in to save Sliders because it was a show that was not doing as well as it should be.
Mm-hmm.
And it had a big staff writers room. They fired pretty much everybody. They brought in Mark Zicree, and he brought in 3 other writers. So it's a very small room, four writers in total, I think it was. And they retooled and fixed and gave a second wind to Sliders so for the duration of that show. With this type of new stipulation, if this were to get approved, that type of writers room would never exist. Because he would have to hire a minimum of 4 more writers and maybe up to a maximum of 14 based on how many additional episodes they would be getting.
Yeah. See, there was years ago I did a video about the Gina Davis Institute and trying to
I remember
trying to impose standards of gender hiring and lines assigned per female characters versus male characters, all these other things. And at any point, and I'm not exactly a professional creative or anything, but at any point where I hear or see something where someone's demanding conditions on someone else's creative process, that's where I like when spider sense starts tingling. Like, that doesn't seem like a wise idea. And when I heard about that one, like mandatory writer room minimums of this, that, like, but what if you got, like you said, Michael J. Straczynski? What if you've got somebody who's just, I'm my own powerhouse and I don't need any, and I don't want anybody else. I mean, sink or swim on their merit, sure, but if that's what they want, why should the union or anybody else be telling me how many people I have to have on this project, what kinds of people I have to have on this project? That always struck me as like, yeah, if that's their weakest argument, I think I'm in agreement with you.
Yeah, that's I mean, it's a very concerning aspect because it's like, well, first of all, you can't compel work in an industry, especially a creative one. And the other part too is, okay, let's say this does go through and you end up filling that writer's room. What are you going to give those other writers to do?
Right.
Um,
Paying
and
them
so
for what exactly?
they're collecting money, but they're not able to contribute work. And even if you do have them contribute work, it might end up being more work on the show overall to get something out of them. Like, it's not going to be like, I can see an advantage for myself because, again, I've always been guests in writers' rooms and stuff. I've never, just because I'm a Canadian citizen, it's always been
Mhm.
hard for me to get landed into a room because there's a whole bunch of work visa stuff and issues there that I've been very, very slowly ticking away off. I will say this: neither Bush nor Obama helped with their immigration policy with regards to me getting work in Hollywood. Um, there was a little bit of progress under Trump, but that, of course, was uh, delayed due to the pandemic.
Sure.
However, I will say this: like in this situation with the writers' room, if they did a mandatory 8, I probably would be one of the people hired on that as like the fill-ins. But
Mhm.
I would also be one of the rare exceptions where I could actually contribute to the show and be value. And the thing is
But
that
would you
not all of
want
that's
to?
going to be there.
Yeah, but would you want to have the suspicion over your head or from anybody else's perspective that the only reason you're there is to fill out a quota?
No, I mean, it'd be really, really horrible.
Yeah.
And the only way you could ever get away from that is if you end up proving your value. And when you have
Right.
people that are demanding this type of thing, they're clearly the type that are never going to try and prove their value.
Exactly. All right. So that's their weakest argument. What do you think is their strongest complaint?
Well, their strongest request is actually something that I found kind of conservative, and that is they wanted included a raise in their WGA residuals of 6% for the first year, 5% for the next 2 years. Like, that's very, very low, but that's what they're asking for. They want that as a minimum increase with regards to residuals. I don't even think that really helps against inflation but that's what they asked for. And the AMPTP said, no, we'll give you 432. And it's like, I mean, and it just, it's crazy. They wanted to also get just, I think that was pretty reasonable. I think that's kind of fair. And that's just for a base. And I think that's in a base that goes across network cable and includes streaming. But again, even though I have emails to the old WGA captains, because I'm not a member, they're not at liberty to provide me information for that. So I have to go secondhand through other friends that are full members to get that. And that information comes out very, very slowly because, again, I don't want them to get in trouble, and they don't want to get in trouble either. Even though it's like, oh yeah, we know him. He is a writer. We he's just in this situation, but they don't want to risk it, and I don't begrudge them for being cautious.
All right, well, let's migrate slightly over to the most recent strike, and that's from the Screen Actors Guild. And I wrote this down to make sure I got it right. American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. So just as a historical note, and Script Doctor is going to be doing some stuff in the future on this, going to the future into the past on the last time that both the WGA and the SAG were striking at the same time, which was back in 1960. But comparison and contrasts of that will have to wait. For the moment, what is the general tenor of why the Screen Actors Guild is also on strike?
A lot of similar reasons. No transparency on numbers. As a result, they haven't had an increase with regards to residual percentages in many, many, many years. And I blame that on the union itself for not being able to push that forward. I'm making an assumption here, so I could be wrong, and I don't mean to offend any union members that are listening out there, but I always found it kind of odd that even if they were to able to bring that up in regards to proposals with every negotiation, the fact that they've never been able to secure it would have frustrated the heck out of me. And I think the union is being incredibly disciplined and reasonable with regards to the fact that it hasn't changed in many, many years, and that they're asking for it this time and trying not to acquiesce to the AMPTP's rejection to it is nice change of pace, and I wish them the best for that. Another talking point, another proposal that is shared between WGA and SAG is the use of AI to essentially replace talent. And it's really funny is that I've been seeing some memes being put up on social media, Twitter. I saw someone else did a little YouTube bit about this, which is the studios essentially want to pirate actors for their own future projects. They want to digitally scan them, take their likeness, take their voice, and pay them for only that one time, and then use it for infinity across any type of projects, so long as that studio exists throughout the universe and any new or old media that hereforth to legalese, etc. And basically, pirate their likeness for forever. And they're like, no.
I remember this theory came up. I heard this twice a long time ago in two different instances. The first one was after the death of Brandon Lee for The Crow, where he hadn't finished filming all his scenes, and so they ended up compositing his face onto another actor in a couple of scenes and using some rudimentary tricks at the time to include Brandon Lee's likeness into places where he couldn't have performed. And I remember hearing at that time, I forget if it was an article or a news piece or something, somebody saying, in the future, we'll just have actors on a disc somewhere, and you can just put them into the movie wherever you want. And I also heard that more so, and this is a real deep cut for those of you out there. There's a movie out there you may or may not remember or know about called Hollow Man. And Hollow Man had required a down to basically the pores on his skin scan of Kevin Bacon throughout the entire process, along with a gorilla for different scenes in order to affect the effects in there. And so I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the work on Kevin Bacon at the time was revolutionary in that his entire body down to the tiniest detail was scanned into a computer onto a disk, and there was like a behind the scenes thing on it.
Mhm.
And even then, if I remember correctly, somebody was talking about, yeah, now we can just, use Kevin Bacon in any movie we want from here on out. And it was a joke at the time. But now, as we've seen with deep fakes and face replaces on movies or de-aging and so on, it's now a reality. And the thing that I saw the other day was background artists, extras,
Mhm.
could end up signing away their likenesses in perpetuity to a studio to use them in the background for any movie from here until infinity.
Yes.
How, given the way technology is going, given the way that CGI has developed and everything, is something like that at all avoidable, you think?
It's avoidable basic only if people don't want to do it. I mean, the real contention is not so much is the fact that they're scanning an existing person to use in perpetuity in any way, shape, or form, as opposed to like stuff that was done in, say, Star Wars Episode 1 or Lord of the Rings, where it was computer animated characters in large crowds or battles that are being used. Like
Mhm.
nobody lost a job for that because the production was never going to hire for that in the first place. They knew they were going to use optical effects and digital effects and computer animated characters.
Right.
In this case here, it's basically the studio saying, no, we want to use real people, but we only want to pay them for one day, and we want to reuse them over and over and over and over and over again. And
Right.
that's where the big problem is. And one of the things I've seen as options is basically suggesting that someone should actually come up with a digital scanning house where they can scan those background actors. They can now own their digital likeness and then license it out to whatever studio they want for whatever rate they can negotiate. So essentially, they are able to make money off of themselves, which is the very, very capitalistic approach that I'm actually down for.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking. I'm trying to think of an analog to another art form, and I'm just thinking about like the song I sang. Because I mean, my body, my physicality, and everything else. If you're going to scan, it's basically a digital representation of my instrument. So if
Mhm.
you're going to use me as a line in your orchestra, you can license it, and I can get a royalty flat and some kind of negotiation. It seems to me that obviously the studios wouldn't want to do that. I mean, if they could get away with not having to give out royalties or residuals or something, licensing someone's entire body in perpetuity without doing it for one day's work or whatever, sure. But and when I keep hearing all these arguments and these complaints and things, I'm thinking in the totality of entertainment media, there have to have been at this point some precedents that even if the technology is definitely beyond anything from 50 years ago, there has to be some kind of parallel that we can look at and draw from to get a guidance on what would be a fair structure. And is it just me, or does it feel like there's a lot of noise, but not a lot of sense being talked right now? And maybe that's just me as an observer. I don't know.
I mean, in any type of situation like this, there's always going to be more noise than sense. Emotions
Mhm.
run rampant, especially in the West. And I think that's a good thing in some regards, but it can also blind people from the real issues at hand. Um, when it comes to this type of model, again, we are still the entertainment industry as it is still a baby considered in relative to the pantheon of entertainment overall.
Mhm.
We've never had a system or institution like this before, so we're always going to be in uncharted territory, and everybody's kind of making guesses and uh, rolling with the punches, as it were. So yeah, unfortunately, there isn't really. I mean, the best model we have prior to that is that some actors incorporate themselves and find a way to legally own their own likeness and then kind of license it out to studios for use in ad campaigns or what have you. But it's also based on approval, and in fact, in some
Mhm.
cases, the estates end up having having the ability to retain likeness rights of their relatives and so forth. So,
Sure.
for instance, the Christopher Reeve estate owns Christopher Reeve likeness, and they
Mhm.
license it out for a repurposing in the Flash movie for him as Superman. That is my understanding. I don't know if any money happened or if it was just basically a favor or an ask and a yes, you can go ahead
Right.
and do this, and we're not going to sue or what have you. But that seems to be the kind of the structure of it. It's about as solid as gelatin, I would say. I
Yeah.
mean, it holds a shape, but it can easily be, altered and shook and
Well,
melted.
well, this is why something that I've made several snarky comments on Twitter over the last several days when I've seen complaints about different things. My first question is, what was in the contract you signed?
Yes.
Because actually my first real job out of college was working for a timeshare company in contract processing and collections. And I learned very quickly of how Satan can write a contract that is decidedly not in your favor, but it's legal. And if you sign it, you're stuck unless you get out of it within the rescission period, which is different from state to state, 1 day, 2 days, something like that. Outside of that, you're stuck. If you agree, if you sign on the dotted line, there's an implication there that you read and agreed to the terms. So whatever comes after the strikes, who knows? But before the strikes and people complaining about things where I only got this for this thing I did 10 years ago, or my I don't know what I got out of this or what they gave me, and like, okay, well, did you sign the paper? I mean, my other question is, did you sign the contract, and or is the studio in breach of that contract? Because if the answer is yes, you signed it, and they're not in breach of it, then tough luck. And that's
absolutely.
not because I don't empathize with people who maybe one was put over them or something. They didn't know any better, or their agent got them a bad deal. Hey, as they say, it rolls down the hill. But if that's what it is, you got nothing to complain about. I mean, you can complain about it, but you don't have any leverage. And so as it goes forward, then yeah, there has to be some kind of standard setup where if I'm being scanned into a system, I am being scanned, and then my likeness is mine. I can license it to you. So there's going to be an industry here pretty quick where you have official scans of things at agencies that they will then license their actors' likenesses out digitally to studios. That's the only thing that makes any sense to me as a way to sort of regulate that, is that it's going to have to become some kind of clearinghouse where the studios don't control the actors' likenesses. The studio's going to have to go to third parties or offer some ridiculous incentive for somebody to fill up their library of digital likenesses or something like that. It's going to be an interesting new Wild West, I think.
Yeah, there are already actors doing it themselves. They've gotten themselves scanned. They own the digital scan of that so that they can use it and for whatever projects they are on. The other part too, like the biggest issue with regards to this, not to sort of to piggyback on your point with regards to the contract, is that these are like the minimum basic agreements. And so some of the stuff that the studios are asking for or saying that they want to do is to try and basically get around that negotiating part on a contract from individual talent to talent. One of the things, I'll share this story because it's one of the ones that I was taught by one of my teachers who wrote for Lucasfilm on Maniac Mansion. His name is David Flaherty. He has passed away, but he was a wonderful man. Married to Jane Eastwood, who is a character actor in Canada. He always told me that whenever you're negotiating for a sale of a script, try and make sure you get at least 2 or 3 rewrite options in that, as you're like the first pick, which means that they have notes, they have to go to you, and they have to pay you for that.
Yes.
And apparently during the 07-08 strike, those types of basic parts of the agreement were no longer required when making contracts for screenwriters. However, every time that I would get to the point of like, oh yeah, we're going to buy your screenplay, here's the contract, I'd be adding in, I want rewrite options or no sale, because I know how little I could make as a result of this if it fails, and I know how much I can make if it succeeds. But if I want it to succeed, it's in my best interest to rewrite it based on the notes that they require, because at least the same voice is going to be there, the same motive, the goals, all those things are going to be very, very much homogenized in that work to get a better result. But the reason that they want to have other writers come in and do it, and I've been some of those, is that they're paid much less.
Right.
So,
money. Yes, exactly.
So I have actually lost a number of very lucrative deals because I've said, no, I will not listen. I have this story. I can do whatever I want with it. I can write it into a novel. I could put it into a comic book, whatever. I could self-produce it, whatever. You don't, if you want this, and we know that you want this, these are my terms, and they're not unreasonable. They're basic. They're the same that they were 10 years ago at the time. So this would be like 2009. And, you'd have a bunch of producers say, well, okay, we're just not going to work with you on that. And you're like, my agent would be very upset. But at the same time, I'm like, I had to remind them, you're losing the commission on those following rewrites as well. And so,
Right. Yeah.
and so that would actually usually, help build our relationships back then. But that was just one of the stipulations. And even when I got very close where I actually did get one of those parts, the worst thing happened, which was that we had another rebound in the recession, and the studio that purchased it tanked. So I got my money, but they never made the movie. And they never even got the casting. Wow. So, good for me in that regard, but bad for me in the fact that I didn't get that because I didn't get made, I didn't get a credit for that. So I didn't get to add it to my resume.
Exactly.
But I mean, I've got the work, so I can probably still turn into something else once the strike is averted. But yeah, those are the type of situations that are in there. And I was told many times, because I was a fresh writer, that it was arrogant for me to ask of that. But I said, listen, the fact that I got to this point shows that I have value. I'm just saying this is what my standards are. And I made a lot of friends with that. And I also made a few enemies with that, but not like real enemies, more like, oh, okay, we just can't work with this guy now. However, who knows
how
what
arrogant
happens.
of you that you want to like protect the integrity of your creative work. How arrogant of you.
Integrity. I just want to keep getting paid.
Well, that too. Yeah. Also, yeah. I want to turn this into a career. I want to keep, I want to keep it up. Okay. So with the writer's weakest argument is mandatory minimums in the writer's room. Strongest argument is just an increase to residuals. With the actors, again, increase to residuals and transparency. What do you think is the actor's weakest point of contention as comparison?
Well, that's a bit trickier because with regards to the actors, it's not just actors, it's stunt performers, singers, dancers, radio announcers, broadcasters. It's a whole plethora of stuff. Okay. They have a 12-page proposal. SAG, I think, really only has like 2 pages. Like they don't have as much that they need, because again, it's just writing part. But I struggled when I was reviewing this on my channel yesterday. I struggled to find something that was kind of unreasonable or their weakest stuff, because a lot of the things are very, very important. Like, they want to change the way self-taped auditions are, and they also kind of want to mitigate those, because one of the things that's very valuable to an actor or any performer is being able to take direction. And on a self-tape, you can't do that. So if the director looks at your tape and you're like, okay, well, maybe they're not right for the part, because I really wish I could have seen them do it this way, they can either send them that note back, which case the actor has to do another self-tape and send it over, and that takes a lot more time. Or back in the day, where they'd be in the room, they would do the performance, the director say, you know what, can you do it this way? And then the actor would be able to do it on the spot, and that could get them the role or not.
Why can't they do it on like a Zoom call these days?
Zoom calls even are bad too, because again, you're still missing a sense. You're still missing the sense of what you bring to it. There's so much power in just being in the same room as an actor when they're performing.
Sure. Okay.
Because you're also trying to get, okay, well, how do they process the information? How quick are they on their feet? And also the other part too is sometimes with a Zoom call, you're limited to the lens of their computer, as opposed to a lens with the camera that's going to be in the room that they're recording the audition on. Or sometimes directors come in with their own little lenses, and they just give a look at the actor through that just real quick to get to see, okay, well, this is the lens I know I'm going to be shooting on. How do they look on this lens? Because again, lenses do make the difference. One of the reasons I don't have cameras in any of my computers that I remove them is because the lenses are so terrible that I kind of look like looks like, you're looking through me through like a fisheye. So it's like it's like a funhouse mirror. So that's why I don't have cameras. And also that's why I use the avatar. It's just a tracing of me, because it's just easier. But
I don't have a camera because I just have a face for radio. That's all.
Yeah, I think I do too, but
I think we all do until we get on camera. The people are like, "Oh my gosh, you're so handsome!" Like, and then it goes to your head, and then, "Oh no!" But maybe someday I'll do a camera. People have been asking me for that for years, but trust me, guys, you're not missing much as far as I can tell. Anyway, yeah, well, it just seems to me like maybe like, I don't know, with the way cameras and things work these days. A Zoom call can be like an intermediary step. Like, you start with the tape and you're not quite sure. You do a Zoom call kind of thing, set it up. Or With technology as it is these days, if an agency or something else couldn't afford to outfit their clients with a high quality camera for the sake of live auditions or tele auditions or whatever, I feel like there's a way that could be worked in where it became more of a standard, and it wasn't like everybody had a potato camera they were using from like 1997 or something to try to get across 7 pixels of footage over the course of like a landline or something. Okay, so the actors, obviously they want more transparency, they want more percentage, but they also want, for the sake of stunt people and everything else, there's other considerations. Are we just talking about like their cut of the production profits and things like that?
Well, in one part, they're actually arguing for stunt performers to actually get a taste of residuals because they don't normally.
Okay.
So they're trying to expand things. They wanted to expand safety for child actors, more
Sure.
supervision, less difficult working conditions with regards to hours in the day and whatnot. The AMPT rejected that. One of the things that I did have a problem with that the AMPT agreed with was regards to healthcare and gender affirming care.
Oh
That
boy. Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, if they acquiesce to this, I would just go through every single one of our proposals and somehow make it tie into gender affirming or whatever thing,
Right.
just to see if they'll say
Exactly.
yes or no. And then if they say no, you can then hold it against them, maybe release it to the public, get some pressure on
Right.
them, and then finally get every single thing you want on your contract.
Yeah.
As a result, since they already caved on something that is already controversial throughout the greater part of the Western world.
That whole, yeah, exactly. What was it I was looking at the other day? It suddenly just escaped me. I'll just move on. So why do you think the actors decided to strike now? Just to follow on the momentum of the Writers Guild, or because they do share similar concerns?
Well, here's the other part too. So, since the unions have formed, they've never wanted to strike. The only reason they do strike is because the studios that they're negotiating with are basically playing chicken. And every single time the studios always end up backing down. Like they don't acquiesce to everything, but they acquiesce to a lot of the important aspects. And the reason being is that because the studio system inside the studio offices, that's more of a 9-to-5 job. That's more of a salary pay, high pay. The people that work there, they're used to the money coming in such high quantities because they spend so much of it at the same time. They don't have to live on the same type of budgets that the majority of talent have to.
Excuse me. Sorry, my phone
no
went
problem.
off. Apologies. Go ahead.
So, and because of that, they've lost the studios have lost every time. It's just the nature of the game. Not only in the fact that the studios only like to pay out big numbers to a very small percentage of the writers and actors in general. It's because of that the majority of the people that are striking are like, okay, so I'm not going to be working for the next 6 months. How is that different from the previous 6 months when I was hustling to trying to find a job and didn't get one anyways? It's the same. There's no real difference to them other than the fact that they don't have to do the hustle now. Now they just have to stand outside the studios and say we're on strike until they acquiesce to a more reasonable deal. At the same time, you have studio executives that maybe have purchased another house, purchased a boat, or had a vacation or something. And if there's not any money coming in to pay for that, they're going to feel it a lot faster and harder than the actors that don't even have that option to begin with. And the ones that are at the higher end of the percentages, they know they're going to be okay, but they also know that one day they might be back down in that position that everybody else is in because they started there in the first place. And they're just wanting to pay it forward. Now, they may all say some stupid stuff in the trades. Don't get me wrong. You should always hold them accountable to that. But they're also realizing, like, Mark Ruffalo, as crazy as he is, there is a possibility in 20 years he may still be alive, but not be working at all. In which case he's down in that slump with the people starting out.
Well, see, now I'm sure very few people who even follow me on Twitter know this. Yesterday, I had a long-running interaction with somebody on Twitter who claims to be a member of the Screen Actors Guild. and I have no idea who they are. It looked like a Twitter account they created just for the sake of the strike, and they were talking as though they were in the know. And so, just for the sake of argument, let's say, and with this interview today upcoming, I thought I'd pick this person's brain a little bit, and long back and forth. But one of the things that a question that came up from the interaction with this person that I had was, um, I once again made sort of another the thing that started it off was I was making a comment about, what was in your contract and what wasn't.
Yes.
And this person's immediate reaction was, do you think that the people who entertain you shouldn't make a living wage?
That's not your question.
And my follow-up response was, I think they should earn for whatever they are paid for, but most actors, I assume, are working in part-time gigs. And so, and I'm summarizing what I said here, and I said, part-time work doesn't equal full-time pay in my world. So I don't understand. They should be paid what they're owed. They should be paid what they're deserved for the amount that they worked and what they agreed to. But I mean, if I only work on a show for 2 weeks or something as a not a headliner actor, should those 2 weeks then pay my entire year's worth of wages? That doesn't happen for anybody else in the real world. So should just being an actor or being under the category of being an actor automatically entitle you to a living wage all by itself? And I'm not talking about like, not for the sake of the performance you're giving, but like in perpetuity all year, should you be paid like as much for 2 weeks worth of work as somebody does a blue collar job for 365 days? That's kind of like the little back and forth I had with this person, trying to figure out where they were coming from and what they felt was fair compensation for your average actor. Does that make any sense? I hope I'm not clouding the issue.
No, I think it makes sense. I think the better comparison would be to say a plumber, because a plumber is usually or an electrician. They're their self-owned business. They work when work is available, and they have their rates and pays. And you as a customer can agree to it or not. And that's just the nature of the game. But as long as if work is available, they work, and if it's not available, well, they're in a tough spot. And the same thing can go with actors, even though it's definitely nowhere near as labor intensive as a plumbing or being an electrician. The principle is that you are your own business to a degree. And I would say, like I think you asked a very fair question, like what was in your contract, because that's the point. Like I have a number of writing partners, and we all have contracts with regards to the works that we've worked on. But we all know that if that script is going to be sold, both of us are going to be in the room to negotiate what that is. And I know out of all of them, they're very happy that I'm going to be there because they know I'm not going to take less than what we're both worth with regards to that work. Even if it might risk us losing the sale, it's always the best to ask and then negotiate down if we are desperate, or if we really think that there could be a good relationship or some sort of back end payoff that we could get at as a result of it. But the other part too is that you also work in an industry where sometimes agents aren't always fully transparent. A few years ago, we had a big problem called packaging, where some agents, not all, but some agents decided that it would be in their best interest to essentially, instead of being the representative of their client, to be their employer. And that's a big conflict of interest. And that was a big contention. The other part too, and the WGA kind of screwed up on this, is that they tried to say fire all your agents, as opposed to the ones that just violated that relationship, that the essential trust between clients and whatnot. And if you follow me on YouTube, or you've seen it on that on other channels, Cameron Pasha, who's also a fellow writer, he was against the general firing of all agents of that. I was too. I was basically like, if you can prove that your agent is trying to make you an employee of them, and at the same time they're taking a percentage, plus they're taking a percentage off the show, plus you're paying them for all this other stuff, and you're actually losing on your salary working on that project, that's wrong. You should hold them to account.
Sure.
But the other, like, I lost a television show because of that. So I actually ended up firing that agent long before the WGA put out that request. But yeah, you always have to look at your contracts, and you always have to consider the fact that there's a massive amount of expenses, more so for actors than writers, when it comes to television. They've got their agents, they have their managers, they have their publicists. If they're women, they have makeup. And then a lot of actors also have lawyers that for every job they get, the lawyer gets a fee.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end of the day, some people that are getting, say, a $5,000 a week paycheck on a show are pulling in maybe $1,200. And then you also have to factor into the idea that they're also living in California. And California is an incredibly expensive state to live in.
Yeah, no kidding.
And it really, and the irony is that it really shouldn't be.
Yeah, well, given the condition of some of these towns, yeah.
Well, I mean, just prior to all the hoopla that happened there, there's so much going on in California, so much opportunity. It's a coastal state, so it has a lot of access for ports. It should be a very affordable place to live. Obviously, not on the coast itself. That should be expensive because it is prime real estate. But anywhere else in the state should be far more affordable than what it actually is. I mean, like the mere fact of the matter is, like, when I would be living in the main cities in Canada, my rent, which would be over $1,200 in Canadian dollars, I would get maybe twice the amount of square footage in my apartment in Canada than I would for the same amount in the United States, where I'd most likely be in an apartment that's a 2-bedroom, but sharing it with 5 other people.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, just without giving anything, like where my friend Satsu lives over in Ohio. Well, I was talking to him one time, and he and his family live in like a townhouse kind of situation, or they did. And I asked him one time what the rent was for this house he was living in, and it was effectively a third of what I pay for my apartment here. And I was just thinking, I can telecommute now. Do I want to move to Ohio? And it just it absolutely blows my mind sometimes just how ridiculously difficult it is, even on a decent income, or at least one that you can survive on. You just, there's nothing left at the end of the day because of just where you happen to live or the circumstances of everything. And, and especially with my sort of my nascent YouTube hobby, I'll just keep calling it a hobby. I've learned that, especially these days, and I'm watching all this actors stuff, you are a business. You have to consider yourself to be a business in how you evaluate your labor and your opportunities and your costs and everything else. And I talked about this earlier on. I keep going back to Twitter, but yeah, YouTube recommended one of my own videos to me this morning. And it was a video about a guy standing on a stage talking about how he was talking about this interaction he had with his family, where he had decided that he was going to drop out of engineering school and instead become a musician, and just how risky a proposition this was. And I was like, well, yes, you're going from, as we talked about earlier, a profession that has a certain perpetual necessity in society to something that is far more abstract and a lot less objective as far as its value. Mm-hmm. So yes, it's a very you're rolling the dice there. And as the presentation he gave developed, and if you watch the video, it's called Putting the Art Before the Horse Pucky. I'm always clever with my titles because I'm an English major. There's the way the guy presented himself. He seemed to present the idea of artists as inherently naive creatures who can't seem to understand that simply being an artist does not necessarily entitle you to some special consideration when it comes to business or something else. And his pitch, in part, and I'm summarizing here, was that effectively, if you call yourself an artist, in his assessment of things, you should just receive some sort of stipend from the government that's more than a living wage for most people. And as I'm reading some of these arguments and complaints from actors and writers and so on, there may be, and you've described them here, you have some very fair and reasonable complaints, but the way it's coming across in the media, especially to me as just sort of an observer, it really feels like people are whining about getting something for nothing. Yeah. And that message might be in the minority. Maybe that's only like the squeakiest wheels getting into the pages because they're more dramatic or something. But at least, again, just as a sideliner, it really doesn't do them any service to have people with that kind of attitude. And on top of that, you have the decline obvious decline in quality of the productions and everything else, which doesn't help your sales pitch when you're saying I'm worth more as a proverbial writer, when you see things like shows that just come out and they're garbage. And I'm not just talking about Disney Plus. It shows all over the place. On Netflix, when you have all these new Netflix originals coming out that are from American production companies and things like this, and they're just gruel. They're just bland. And then you see these Korean costume. I was drawn into watching a Korean costume drama about a month ago with a friend of mine. I was like, I don't know if I really want to watch this. This isn't really my cup of tea. And she's like, no, you like it. And so I ended up watching a supernatural costume drama from Korea, or from South Korea, called Alchemy of Souls. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you what, that first season, that drew me in. As ridiculous as a setting as it would be for anything I've ever been interested in, the characters, the acting, the situations, it drew me in more than anything I have ever watched as a Disney Plus original, or most Netflix originals outside of, say, maybe the first season of Stranger Things, Daredevil, and Midnight Mass most recently.
Oh yeah, and Midnight Mass was all right. I enjoyed that.
Midnight Mass was great. Oh man, that was the perfect balance of drama, horror, and introspection. I mean, amazing piece of work. Anyway, not to go too far on that, because I could go on forever. But the competition in quality from other places, and the demonstrable lack of skill, talent, and quality in what's being produced lately, was this the right time for the writers to strike? I mean, it would make more sense to me to strike when Hollywood is going gangbusters. Except that Hollywood's in decline, theaters are in decline, productions are in decline, quality is in decline, the audiences are retreating. This seems like the worst possible time to try to leverage yourself as valuable. Or am I completely in la la land? No pun intended.
No. For everything that you say is coming from a very logical approach, but there's a subtext with this strike, and that is, for the last 8 years or so, the best writers in the industry have not been getting hired because they're can get hired. Yeah. They're too expensive, but also they can get hired. But here's the other part too. Producers at the studios have realized, oh, if we hire this great writer and we give them notes, they're going to argue and push back that those notes are not going to be useful, or they're going to put them in a way that's not going to be effective, or it's not going to get what I want across. And it's just going to be a frustrating nightmare. However, there's a lot of young and hungry writers out there. They'll do whatever the heck we say.
And they've got no leverage. They've got no tenure. They've got no connections. We can do, exactly. That's why you see with these Marvel movies, and I've been noticing this for years now, of course, they'll hire some up and coming director who has like one indie credit or something. And then like, Josh Trank is going to direct the next Star Wars movie. He did Chronicle, everybody. Yeah. Except because they think
he wasn't ready for it. Yeah.
He wasn't ready for it. But of course, they didn't care whether he was ready or not, because he's just a proxy. He's just a proxy for the studio's needs, wants, and desires, and the producer's notes. Like you say, they don't want to hire anybody because the studios want to maintain all the control, creatively and otherwise. And especially with, as Critical Drinker says, the message, because we can't leave that out either.
Well, it's one of many messages, because again, messages are a byproduct of a lot of film. There's a movie out right now that has a message that is doing gangbusters in the cinema. But again, it's also about the accessibility. So the subtext of this strike is basically saying, well, listen, the writers that know they're valuable are saying enough is enough. The studios are the reason we're in this decline, because they're picking the wrong people. And the other part too is that even if they were picking the right people, and let's say Hollywood is in huge success, they'd be making way more money. We'd still end up having to strike again, because there's no transparency with regards to that. And the leverage is and basically it's looking at this way. Well, we made you all this money, and theaters are still popular, and their streaming shows are still popular. So even if we go on strike, you're still making the money that we're asking for, that we're never going to see. So you're able to sustain yourselves. Now with the WGA saying, well, like, okay, this opportunity for the negotiations has come up. We do want a fair deal. If they don't, we will go on strike, and we're in a better position because the studios have made such bad decisions over the last several years that they are suffering. So they need us more than we need them. And that's the subtext they're going at. And here's the other part too. A lot of the writers that are writing some of those bad shows, not all of them are from middle of nowhere, moving to LA, becoming a writer and whatnot. A lot of them are, descendants of some very powerful people in the industry. They're nepotism hires. they're not even struggling themselves, but they also want to work because they want their reputation. And they want to be able to go to their parents and family and say, like, look, I'm continuing the family, business. I'm still working in the entertainment industry, blah, blah, blah. But they're just not qualified for it. And this is a way to kind of shift them out a little bit as a result, because certain deals will be broken. There seems to be a new guard slowly eking in on the corporate side of things that are a bit more focused on profits than they are on messaging. I mean, Paramount, Warner Brothers, Sony, and Comcast have been kind of reformatting their models over the last 2 years. Disney is going to be the major holdout, and but the rest of the studios could beef up. Amazon is a little touch and go here and there. Same with Apple, but Apple has so much money at their disposal, they can do whatever the heck they want for 100 years and probably not feel it.
Yeah.
But again, the rest of the industry is trying to figure out what is going on right now. They're a product of their own hubris. They're a product of their own sheltered world, because there's a lot of obvious problems that they could address if they just started interacting outside of that bubble. And when you hit a certain threshold financially, you don't really want to associate with the people that pay your bills. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah. All right. Well, as we eke into towards the winding down phase of the broadcast, your prediction, how long does this go on before there's a break and things go, quote unquote, back to normal and the strikes end?
That's
Read
hard
the
to
tea
tell.
leaves. I know. Yeah, I know. It's difficult, all things considered. But like, are we talking? I mean, now the WGA has been on strike since May 2nd, so it's not exactly a short term there. But are we talking end of summer, end of year? Are we going into next year? What do you think?
Well, unlike the 07-08 strike, the studios are essentially losing $1 billion a month with just the WGA, excuse me. With SAG involved, that's going to grow exponentially, because now they can't even shoot anything. Like beforehand, they had scripts that they couldn't rewrite, they couldn't do anything. They just have to shoot them as is. They could at least shoot it and get it out there and make some money. Now they can't shoot, so that's going to go up exponentially. And as I mentioned earlier, the studios are used to that influx of cash. When they're not getting it, it's going to hurt them more. Disney especially, they have a couple of shows coming out on Disney Plus. They have a couple of movies that are going to be debuting this year. Same with Warner Brothers.
Oh yeah.
It looks like the audiences have said, the blockbusters that you're providing us are not really what we're looking for, so we're not going to show up, which means they are going to be hurting faster. And again, the majority of actors and writers live on a very modest income when they have it. And I mean, it's not going to be a walk in the park. It's going to be very difficult for a lot of them, but they can weather it longer because they're already used to it as it's been the norm to them. The studios I would be surprised if it goes beyond the end of August. I mean, if it was just the WGA, I would have figured, okay, this will probably last till August, and then they'll find a deal and get back. Now that SAG is also striking, which I wasn't expecting, it might be a little sooner. But if the studios don't want to return to the negotiating table, that's going to be on them. And they're going to have to answer to their investors on that, because back in 07-08, the investors were really hounding them, saying, get back in the room, make a deal. You're costing us money.
Right.
And that could be the case here, because we've got 2 or 3 investor calls from some of the major studios coming up over the next 2 weeks. I'm pretty sure those questions are going to be brought up. And they can't go very long without having even a further delay, especially since they've been hitting the ground running, trying to catch up for all the delays that they had due to the pandemic. A summer without any productions that goes into the fall and maybe even the start of winter will really, really hit them hard. And they will be able to bounce back, but nowhere near as quickly as they could with the pandemic. And I don't think they want to weather that again.
I saw, just as one more thing, and then guys, I have one more question here for Script Doctor, and then if he's amenable, we'll give a couple minutes here for some questions if you have any.
Absolutely.
I saw a comment from Tom Cruise, who seems to be a kind of bellwether for moderation in Hollywood, which is strange to me given his personal history. But either way, he made he made an interesting point of how he argued that actors should be allowed and should even during the strike promote their work to theaters, because he made the point of if you're going to starve the theaters of any promotion, then what will you have? And I'm summarizing here.
What will you have to go back to when you return?
What will you have to go back through? Yeah. So if you completely cut everything off, but you do, eventually get through the strike, won't it be a Pyrrhic victory if one of the traditional and classic outlets for you to bring your product to market effectively dries up and dies even further than it already has after something like this? Do you agree with that, or do you think he has a point that when this is all over with, they might end up worse off than when they started?
Well, my theory is that the only reason the theaters are struggling at this point is because we have inflated budgets and arrogant executives picking the wrong stuff to put back and give to the audience.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think promoting the movies is going to help change that anyways.
Okay.
I think the social atmosphere, especially for much of the normies and the general audience out there, is that going to the movies hasn't been as fun as it used to be. Why bother? It's also gotten more expensive.
No doubt.
And I think this summer box office is reflective of that. I think last year was pretty decent for them, especially with Top Gun Maverick and a couple of other movies that did fairly well, but it wasn't a groundbreaking year. But now people have kind of picked up on the pattern of what they're getting when they go to the movie theaters, and I think they're perfectly justified just not showing up. I don't think if every actor decided to go promote every movie that's in theaters, that would make a difference at this point. I think what you're looking at is a type of renaissance where the only way you're going to get audiences back is by putting out quality work, stories that are far more accessible, high concept. If they have any type of message, it's more of a byproduct as opposed to the leading argument in the movie.
Right.
And it's going to cause opening those first weekends to suffer, because it's going to require the word of mouth in addition to the general advertisement to get people to go in for the next weekend. And it's going to be a slow ground up, and it's going to take a number of back-to-back hits before people and audiences start realizing, oh, wow, movies are back again, and let's go to the theater. And I think the other part too is to also expand the window between when it leaves theaters and when it goes on to sorry, someone's calling me. It's nobody important. When he goes back to, like, at home media, streaming, physical media, those types of things, rebroadcast, syndication, what have you, those need to kind of come back into a new mold in order for people to kind of regain their faith in Hollywood and entertainment. Because I know there's a lot of people out there that says, let it burn, what have you. I'm like, I get that. It's been pretty upsetting for a lot of the big players calling out audiences for their fair and justified criticism. But you have to realize is that life gets pretty dour if you don't have any sort of respite or entertainment to relax and enjoy. And even with the back catalog of things, a lot of people are not going to be able to find some of the best stuff out there from like 20, 30, 40 years ago, because they might not have ever heard about it. And there's not enough people out there to talk about it.
And there's not enough copies of there's not enough copies of physical versions of those things now that you could find, because they're either moratorium out of print, or you can't. If you can't find them digitally, they practically don't exist.
Almost to a point. Like, good luck trying to find the complete set of Gunsmoke. That's 20 years, 20 seasons.
Geez. Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, yes, it'll keep you entertained, but it's going to be hard to find.
You know what I miss? And this is just an odd thing before we get to some questions. I miss fan theories about the meanings of movies, because these days you don't have to have a theory. The movie tells you. Like I remember like Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It's like, did you know that the entire movie is just in Cameron's head? He never got out of bed that day, and Ferris Bueller is just a figment of his imagination. I'm like, oh, wow. Oh, that's so deep, dude. Something like that. Except the movies these days, they don't give you any room for that because they tell you they beat you over the head with the message. And this is what you're supposed to think about it. And this is how it is. There's no ambiguity. There's no nuance. There's no mystery. Just here it is. And this is how it is. Anyway, England DG, thanks so much. IATSE is playing around with striking as well.
Yes, IATSE is in full support with a lot of the unions. They also reached out to the WGA before the strike was announced back in April, saying that whatever happens, they'll support them because IATSE works when the writers work. They also work when the actors work. They need those types of jobs. Those jobs are far more stable in comparison to the talent because there's always something in production, and you need those crews there. But regardless of that, when there's not anything in production, yeah, they suffer and they hurt as well. I will say this: actors really need to stop saying about we need to go back to work so we can afford to send our kids to camp. Camp is a privilege and not necessity. Talk about your mortgage. Talk about things that matter, like sending your kid to school because they actually have they want to go into a trade or something of that nature. Not sending them away to some sort of resort camp. Nobody cares about that type of stuff.
Yeah, if there's one thing that both, Hollywood has never really done themselves any favors in trying to present the most concise and clear message to the outside world, either when it comes to productions and certainly in this instance, now when it comes to why you're striking, because it really does sound like a bunch of spoiled rich kids complaining about not having enough to buy their next latte. And I know that doesn't represent everybody, but that's kind of the tone you get out of a lot of it.
No, I've been telling my actor friends, like, listen, the regular audience might not know you, but if you live stream yourself on the picket line to like a YouTube or Twitter or something like that, they will actually get a better picture of what that industry is than the A-list stars that have been a little disconnected from the rest of the world.
Shady Grin says, thank you for your perspective, Script Doctor. I am very much anti-union, but I'm not heartless and don't wish suffering or the poorhouse on anyone. I still want people to get a fair shake. I think that's generally what the common through line for most people is, but really it is a matter. And of course, it's not so much the public in general that has anything to do with this. It comes down to the studios. But if the studios think they can leverage public distaste for what the strikers are doing into negotiation, yeah, they're not doing themselves any favors, like I say.
Oh yeah, and I totally get the anti-union stuff. Really, the concept of the union is fine. It's the fact that it's also got the biggest flaw, which is that people.
There's a perpetual fallible aspect of just human beings. That's why we have laws. Tyrannus Alexandrius, the Invictus Lich. Oh yes, let Hollywood burn, cleanse it with fire, salt the earth to ensure the age of the movie star has come to an end. I don't want. I miss actual movie stars. I think of like movie stars. I think of actors who role to role, I wouldn't recognize them as their previous role. So like,
Gary Oldman,
Philip Seymour Hoffman, who am I? Daniel Day-Lewis. I mean, actors who actually become a character. And I have less. It really depends on the actor, really depends on their attitude, but I have less of an inclination towards like an actor who shows up and they're just themselves in a different movie, like The Rock or Will Smith half the time.
Or
Caviezel. Your Thin Red Line to Passion of the Christ, that is a bit of a, there's some range there.
He had more to do in Thin Red Line. I did like him in that. I was not impressed with Count of Monte Cristo. The supporting cast in Sound of Freedom were fantastic. God,
I haven't seen it yet.
See that movie just for them alone. Caviezel, he feels like a background character in that film. But
I will say that Caviezel, as a physical presence, I always appreciate it. As an actor, I always felt like he's kind of a block of wood, a very imposing, and he's got sort of a physical gravitas to him, especially now that since he's Jesus. But still, it's kind of a block of wood. England DG, thank you again. I think it's important to mention why this pre-negotiation of rates can benefit an industry like this. It allows production companies to project their expenses when they are in the preliminary phases.
Oh yeah, this is a big deal for the studios themselves, and even for independents too. And independents right now, ones that are not associated with the AMPTP, they can sign interim agreements, which gives them that data so that they can actually make a proper projection of how much they're going to spend on their production. and you get more independent films. And one of the things that really helps revitalize the industry, and has since the 70s up until the early 2000s, is the fresh independent filmmakers and talent that come in and give it a boost. It's one of the things that a lot of people kind of haven't really clued in on, and I don't begrudge them for that, because it's not something you really want to pay attention to, is that the alternative, whatever that might be, eventually becomes mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how things kind of keep going and going. And what we've had in Hollywood, at least since I started there, is a different type of gatekeeping, a gatekeeping where they don't want the merit-based independence. They want some other type of independence that don't necessarily prove themselves in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, we've seen a very stagnant level of ingenuity and creativity as a result.
England follows up with paying a residual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you, England. And Spudgun, Scribelight, Script Doctor mentioned a movie with a message that was doing well at the moment. Would that be Don't Touch Kids film? I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is, and I mean, I really do like seeing upstarts like that,
Fox Studios
outdo.
film. Yeah.
Yeah. Fox Studios film that Disney had control of, and then they put it on a shelf for 3 or 4 years or whatever, and then sold it to somebody else. If you guys want to know the story behind Sound of Freedom and exactly how it's even more hilarious that it outdid Indiana Jones on its second weekend or whatever, there's a Midnight's Edge breakdown of the whole shebang from I think like a week ago. So go check out Midnight's Edge. So we're at the hour and a half mark, Script Doctor, and then we said we do 90 minutes. So I really appreciate you coming on here. Is there anything that I didn't ask about that you wanted to mention, or any shout outs you want to give, or anything like that before we wrap up?
All I'll say is, if you do have an actor that hasn't said something stupid to you or to audiences, find their social media, let them know if you support them or not, whatever. But also advise them to, if they can, live stream themselves from the picket line interviewing other actors. Let's break the bubble between the 1%ers of talent that toe the company line of what the studios have been doing, and get the talent that could actually maybe step up a little bit and breathe some new life and maybe some new rationality out there, because we are out there, writers and actors, but we don't always have the platforms for that, and sometimes a lot of them don't think to do that. Like, I, as a writer, I never thought I'd be doing YouTube stuff. I was just getting frustrated, wondering if I was crazy with the way I was pitching stuff, the way I was formulating stories. I just started putting my opinions out there, and apparently I got an audience. So
yeah, you're telling me. I mean, when I started doing this, I was like, it'll be something if I get like 10 people subscribing to me,
Exactly.
and that was my best. Well, maybe not my best Kermit the Frog, but I tried. Oh, England DG. You're right. Out of context, you were paying me a residual. That was the joke. He says, paying a residual is supposed to be a joke. See, I'm an English major, not a humor major. So you'll have to forgive me. I'm kind of slow on the uptake sometimes, but I really appreciate it. Guys, again, take a look at the links in the description to Script Doctor's YouTube channel, Twitter, Patreon, the whole 9 yards. Check him out, follow him, subscribe to him, hit that bell. Whether it's him doing a gaming stream just for fun, or he's showing up on another show, or he's got a new article out on his Patreon regarding Hollywood and script writing and things like that. Definitely worth your time. Also, before I forget, and I did, and I apologize, the top of the chat box, guys, there's a link to a GoFundMe to friend of a friend. Twisted Skipster's friend needs some help with some bills, because speaking of making ends meet and things like that, friend has encountered some life difficulties, and any help you can provide would greatly be appreciated. If you can't donate, that's perfectly fine, but if you can share that out on social media, that would as well be appreciated. So Script Doctor, where can people find you next, or would you have any projects coming up that people should know about?
Well, I mean, I've already kind of hinted this, but I've been working on a couple of secret projects that are not affiliated with Hollywood that I'm hoping we'll be able to announce in the next few months. So keep an eye out for that. One of the people I'm working with is very, very camera shy, and they haven't put themselves out there, and we're trying to get him to do it. But again, you don't want to push too hard.
No.
But it is part of like the marketing part of the brand. However, those are some things. Is one of the reasons why I initially started the Patreon, is to get some extra cash to help fund that project. However, because of the strike, I've been given permission to use that to just pay my basic bills for now. But no, just follow me over on Twitter. You'll see me pop up here and there. If I do go live on my channel, that's where you'll find it first. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Maybe I'll go live, maybe I won't. Depends if there's something to talk about. I like to try and keep things a little different on my channel, talk more about story and a little bit of industry news, but not so much on rumors and casting and firings and things of that nature. You have way better sources than myself for that. So I try to just keep it light and fresh and different on my area. So if that's your bag, love to see you swing on by.
All right. And as for myself, guys, quick programming note. Tomorrow, Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, will be another installment of TED Excellence, where I'll take another look at an off-brand TED Talk. This time, it's going to be advertising and marketing and stuff, because the guy apparently is going to be using some kind of Mad Men analogy in his argument. I can't wait. He's also wearing a pinstripe suit. So, I mean, that'll be... I mean, this is the top tier TEDx, which I don't think that says anything. But either way, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Script Doctor, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate your insight on this. I'm a complete noob when it comes to all these ins and outs of contract negotiations and Hollywood behind the scenes stuff. And I really appreciate you guys who have that direct knowledge educating the rest of us so we have some kind of context as to what's going on.
I am happy to talk with you about this type of stuff. I've loved our hanging outs that we've done before on your channel. And I also like just being an extra voice of reason in an entertainment industry that doesn't appear to have any.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, and guys, again, if you haven't checked out his channel, in the periphery, also check out Midnight Zeds, check out Neurotic, check out Heel versus Babyface and Critical Drinker. All this entire little network of new, I don't want to give it a title so much, but this is like rational criticism of entertainment. I don't know how else to put it. It's just like, sometimes boisterous, but always interesting criticism of entertainment, and I love watching it. So everyone, again, thank you for joining us. If you have any other comments or questions for Script Doctor, be sure to follow him on Twitter or leave them in the comments below. We'll take a look at those, and leave a like on the way out if you could. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very, very little to do. Everybody who donated either to myself or to the GoFundMe at the top of the chat box, thank you guys so much for your generosity. It's very much appreciated. And with that, again, Script Doctor, thank you. Everybody, hope you have a good rest of your, what day is it today? Wednesday. That's right. Wednesday, hump day. Hope you have a good rest of your Wednesday, the rest of your week, and a good weekend ahead of you if I don't see you before then. I hope you're all safe and well. If you are not well, please get well soon. And we'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, I was going to say you can say bye. Okay.
I can't.